Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Well, hello, everyone. Today, my guest is Mickie Kennedy, the press release ninja, founder and president of eReleases. And today, we're going to talk about how to leverage press releases to grow your business. Welcome, Mickie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So as you know, the way I start every one of these is with a story. Tell me yours. How did you get to be the press release ninja, and why do you do what you do?
So I was finishing up a Master's of Fine Arts in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry about 27 years ago. And my career plan was to wait tables and write poetry. And so I did that for a summer. And at the end of the summer, I just realized I cannot do this the rest of my life. My back hurt, my knees hurt. Being on concrete for 8 to 10 hours a day is just harsh. And I felt so zapped, after a shift that I wasn't reading or writing. And so I just decided I need a safe office job. And so I applied to a bunch of places and was hired at a telecom research startup in DC as employee number 3. And I was tasked with writing press releases. I didn't know anything about them, but I learned what I could, and I was sending them out via fax. We had a little Rolodex of journalists that we had their fax numbers, and that was it. And the funny thing was, we had like 140 some journalists we faxed. Our fax machine, which was state of the art and cost a lot of money at the time, only held 100 numbers. So I had to program 100 numbers and then delete them and then program the next batch of 40 or 50 numbers. And I begged my boss, let's buy a second fax machine and I could keep the numbers programmed and we would save so much time. But he just felt like they were so expensive, several $1,000s at the time, that we just didn't do it. So I was wasting a day or two doing the programmed phone number thing for a while. Not much happened when I was sending out the press releases, and nobody was like mad or anything, but I just felt disappointed in myself. Like I wasn't doing something right. And so I went and, read a lot of articles, and I noticed that journalists like a story arc. And so I reformulated our press releases, which were largely dumps of data because we were publishing telecom traffic statistics. And, I would find the anomalies with funny stories or interesting stories behind it. And then the first one was, there was a country in the Caribbean that accounted for more inbound and outbound traffic to the US than I think like most other countries in the Caribbean combined. And, why was that? And it turned out that was the center for 1-900 numbers at the time, which were really popular. You call a 1-900 number and you get your horoscope. Sometimes it'd be,
Those were like fee for service numbers, weren't they?
Yeah, they were like 50 cents a minute for a pre-recorded horoscope, and you pressed a number for your sign, or you could call and, talk to someone live. It might be more, $2 or $3 a minute, and you could get advice on, a sick dog or, all different types of things. They even had like, love lines where you'd be on a party line with a bunch of other people in your city, and it'd be different numbers for that. And it was just really kind of interesting. And so when I sent that release out, we got picked up by The Economist, Financial Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and 3 telecom trade publications. I was like, well, I wonder if that's just an anomaly. So I continued to try to, pick out anomalies and stories, and we continued to get picked up routinely. And then I started looking at what other patterns could we find rather than looking at just data points this year. Why not go back several years and see if we could extrapolate data there? And one of the interesting things we saw is that countries that had double-digit economic growth, non-industrial countries, often 3 to 5 years before that, they started achieving double-digit telecom traffic growth, predominantly to industrialized countries. So we put that together and sent it out, and all of a sudden we started getting orders from investment firms and hedge funds. And before that, our customer base was only telecom companies, telecom analysts, and telecom attorneys. And so it really opened us up to a lot different markets. And we just got lots of exposure, a lot of recognition. Sometimes we'd get articles and it would result in a lot of sales. Sometimes it would just result in people talking about us and a lot of shares and visits to the website and a lot of people signing up for our white papers. And so it was just really great. And I just was really impressed with how it was, really making a difference for this small business. And I had the idea like, wow, why doesn't other people do this? Like I felt like I figured it out.
Did
And,
you ever get that second fax machine because you were making so much money for the company?
no, but an interesting thing started to happen is as I was faxing, I'd get phone calls and say, "Hey, in the future, instead of faxing, could you email it to me?" And so I did get under 100 fax numbers after a while because a lot of people wanted me to email. And that was the light bulb moment for eReleases where I just said, I could just, create list of journalists and just hit send and on an email. And it's so much easier than a fax machine. And I mentioned it to my boss and he goes, there could be a business there. So I spent about a year at that point in my spare time, which wasn't considerable working for a startup, just networking with journalists online, mostly bulletin boards. And I asked them if I could email them press releases for a venture I would be starting. And most all of them said sure. And so I launched in October of 1998 with about 10,000 journalists, and I was just a matchmaker, sending my messages and press releases on behalf of clients to journalists. And people did really well. And over the years, PR Newswire came and approached me and said, "Hey, you should also send through us." PR Newswire is the oldest and largest newswire of press releases in the U.S. There's predominantly just a duopoly here. It's Business Wire and PR Newswire, and they wanted to offer me like a local or state distribution for a discount. And I was really pushing for a national distribution, but they're expensive. They charge $1,600 to move a 600-word press release nationally, and my clients at the time were just paying like $299. But we continue to talk. And one thing that I discovered was they have an overnight editorial team that's not very active. They have to be there in case there's breaking news or a recall, or they needed to get something out to Asian markets. But predominantly, they just spend hours idle. And so I said, I could take all of my releases going forward and start scheduling them for next business day. And you could set them up overnight and it would cost you no additional labor. And so at that point, they finally did agree to give me a very steep discount for a national distribution. And still to this day, every press release that goes out through eReleases gets a national distribution on PR Newswire. And rather than paying $1,600, you're paying like, about a third of the price of that. So it's a huge savings. It is only for small businesses and entrepreneurs and startups and people like that. If you're a large company or publicly traded, we're going to steer you to our friends at PR Newswire. But it is a really great relationship, and I feel very blessed that they came along when they did, because my original business model would have probably fallen apart somewhere along the line, because email is no longer the way to reach journalists. It's the way to infuriate journalists. Their inbox is chaos. There has been a really big movement over the last 25 years, and it is the licensing of media databases. And when a golf club company pays $10,000 for a yearly subscription to a database and realize there's only 2,700 journalists interested in golfing products, they start talking themselves into emailing financial journalist, banking journalist, business journalist, because in their mind, bankers and business people play golf. So these, financial analysts are going to love a golf press release. And the truth is, they're never going to write about products or golf products. They are strictly writing about banking, financial news. And as a result, there's so many off-target press releases, and it is the bane of every journalist. And in fact, PR firms who pitch by email are having to follow up and call almost every time because the journalists can't find the pitch in their inbox because it's just so saturated with junk.
So Mickie, let's back up and make sure that all the listeners understand what is a press release.
Sure. So a press release is just an announcement to the media that you hope they will transform and write into an article. It's usually written in the third person. It's like, Microsoft announces the next version of Office with, Microsoft Office 2024 or something along those lines. And, following that headline, there may be a subhead and then an opening paragraph. There's usually a city and state that would be there. They call that part of the date line with the date. But it might be Redmond, Washington for Microsoft. And then there's a few paragraphs, and it's usually pretty dry. It's usually pretty simple. It's not very sophisticated. It's not the finished article, but the roots for that, so that a journalist can turn it into an article. There can be links. There can be photos or images that like a logo that you can attach. And images work really well because a lot of people are posting articles online, even if they're print publications. And if a journalist is considering two press releases of, say, equal newsworthiness, and one has photos, they're going to gravitate towards that because they know that will interact with their audience better, and that their audience will have a better experience and be more likely to stick around if there's an image there. So you definitely want to make sure that you include those. And candid shots work better today. 15 years ago, it was all about everything being professionally shot. But today, I think what you take on your smartphone is probably sufficient for getting stuff out there. The exception might be a headshot or something like that if you're announcing a new president or executive. I think if it's a new hire press release for someone who's not an executive, I don't know that you want to send that out because you're very unlikely to reach the newsworthy scale that you're going to get a lot of mileage or pick up about with that. Probably better just to take those low-level hires and get their photo and write a few sentences about them and send them to your local paper, local business magazine, or business newspaper, and maybe directly to a few trade publications. And some trade publications have an on-the-move section with a separate email address. You can just quickly email that along. But other than that, they're not sophisticated. Most of them do have a quote, these press releases. And that's the one place that I feel that you really should spend more time in addition to the headline, because the headline and your quote are probably the two most important elements of your press release. And the quote can really save you, because if the press release is like a mid-grade press release as far as newsworthiness, but that's an amazing quote, a journalist can write around an amazing quote and build it up a little bit. That quote really can center it and make it stand out really well. And when I say an amazing quote, what do I mean? It could be like, I have a poetry background and a writing background. It could be like my wordsmith. But for the average person, just, say something as strong as you can, something that's so tight and strong that if a journalist was to paraphrase it, there'd be a loss. It would ache a little in that spot where they had removed that quote. And so you really want to make sure that you are saying something as tight, using as many active verbs as possible. But other opportunities and quotes could be to, say something a little bit contrarian, going against the industry. Journalists are definitely going to not want to paraphrase that, because they want that to be attributed to someone. They don't want to say something that is goes against the grain a little bit. So all of those can go into making a really great quote, and it can really save you when it comes to trying to get media pickup, because sometimes journalists will write an article about you and they'll include your quote, and the managing editor will just stick a red pen through your quote, and the article gets published without your quote, and you are nowhere mentioned in that article. And if you have a really strong quote, a managing editor is not going to take a red pen through that, and it will preserve you. And by context, your company will be mentioned, because you will be cited as, who said the quote and then who you are. And so that's another really important thing there.
So I'm getting the impression here, because I'm not an expert in press releases, but you got obviously the title, the heading, and the subheading, which are intended to catch the eye, at least, and the attention of the journalist that you're trying to get a hold of, and then you have a summary paragraph, and then some details below it, or is it just
usually you don't use a summary paragraph,
no executive summary or anything like that? Okay.
No, usually the first paragraph introduces the main importance of the big picture of what the press release is about.
So do you write these like you would write an article in the newspaper? As I understand it, you write it most important and then lesser and lesser important, so that the
we call it the inverted pyramid model, where you have the most important aspects up there at the top, and then you sort of winnow down to the least important things. And usually it ends with what we call the boilerplate, or the about section, where at the very end you'll have usually about 2 to 4 2 to 4 sentences about the company, or if it's an individual author, about the author or something like that. And those usually get recycled. You can update it and tweak it a little bit, but that they're pretty standard.
Okay. So how do you recommend that small businesses use these? Because I'm guessing that the vast majority of small businesses don't. So what's the way to get into this game? What's the right way to go about doing it? You do this locally? You do this nationally? How is it that?
So it depends on what your marketplace is. So if your marketplace is local, there's no need paying for a service like mine and going out nationally, because getting an article in another market probably isn't going to help you if you can't do business with them. But if you are someone who does business online and you can work with people nationally, then I feel like using a service like ours that goes over the wire nationally is a really good approach. When it comes to someone who's only in a local market, I tell them to not pay to have somebody get your message out. And you certainly don't have to pay to go over a wire, even a local market. If you think about it, for a local business, there is probably less than 10 people that could potentially write about you, and 10 publications or outlets. And we're going to include TV and radio here, as well as business magazines, newspapers, things like that. Also, don't discount the possibility of community papers, even the free weekly ones and stuff like that. Though I have a little trick with those, but look in your local paper and figure out generally who covers your industry, who generally writes those articles that are a little bit more involved, and then approach that outlet. Look online, see if there is an email address, and if there isn't, approach the outlet and say, "Hey, I'd like to pitch this person. I'd like to get their email address to send them over a message. I'm a local business." They will give it to you. These are not celebrities. These are members of your community. It would be very odd if they wanted to just wall themselves off and not be approachable. So do be persistent, and do ask for that email address. They may forward you directly to that person, and you have to talk to him on the phone and just ask for the email address. If he says, "Just pitch me now," I always go, I would love to, but I'm just a shy English major, and I need to get my thoughts down on paper and send that over to you. But if you'd like, I could follow up by email, by phone, after I've emailed that over to you. And like I said, email isn't so great now, so do collect these phone numbers and do ask for the phone number as well, and maybe call afterwards. I will say that for local media, the inbox overload is usually not as bad as it is for other people, like in trade industries and people that are in national publications like your Inc. magazines and Fast companies and things like that. But you might need to occasionally you make a phone call just to ensure that they got your pitch. And it is a pitch. You don't have to write a press release. It's just can be as simple as a few sentences describing what it is that you're pitching to these local journalists. It could be like, hey, I'm a local dry cleaner, and I know that going green is really big in a lot of industries. And I would love to share with you something that we've recently developed or incorporated into our cleaning method that means that we are not using any harmful chemicals. And I would love to talk with you a little bit more about that. And then maybe put a quote in there. The importance of going green, the importance of being positive from a pollution standpoint in your environment, but really make that quote really tight. So you have 3 or 4 sentences, an amazing quote. Maybe if you have a couple photos, you could attach that as well and email that along to them. You're going to do this with your local paper, if it's appropriate. Magazines. In our market, we have Baltimore Magazine, which is a consumer magazine. So if you're B2C, especially if you have a pricey product, that works really well because it tends to be a little more upscale to pitch them. We have both a business magazine and a business newspaper here, which is probably not that common. But find out who the best person there is by looking at them and finding out who would cover your industry. If they have an online component, you can usually look there, so you don't have to necessarily subscribe to the print publication. Look at TV and radio, and are there occasional segments that you notice that might be applicable for you? Like I've seen sometimes they bring people in for de-stressing, and they'll give massages or chiropractic or something like that in the studio. So is there something like that visually would be very interesting for you? If so, reach out to that TV station. If it's the news channel, reach out to them and ask who the producer or booker is. Remind them that you saw a recent segment and you felt like going forward at another time, you have something that's equally interesting. Maybe you're a wedding planner and you're like, hey, I would love to come in with some people and show some options that are affordable for, flowers or, table settings for weddings, sort of a DIY approach. Something like that could be really interesting. So, figure out what it is that either would work really well on radio or TV visually, and pitch that producer or booker as well. And again, it's just calling and asking who the producer or booker of that segment is. And then, as you have a Rolodex of less than 10 people, you're just going to pitch them as you have ideas. I say, if you can do it every month or a couple of months, go for it. Quarterly at the least. Look at things that are trending in other cities, and could there be a way in which you could craft a pitch based on what you've seen in another market for your person? Never say, I saw this in another market, do you want to copy it? But you could say, hey, I've noticed a lot of people talking about dry cleaners in regards to preserving wedding dresses. And as we approach June, I thought I would love to share with you what we're doing. And here's some photos of what we have done that look really cool, the way it's all packaged and everything, and I'd love to share more with you. Then boom, you have an amazing quote. And so all of that can go really well as far as helping you approach and reach local media. The local weekly free neighborhood papers, so many people don't consider them media. And the reason is they probably don't either. They consider themselves places for ads, and to them they often get ready to go to print and realize we don't have a lot of content
We don't have enough stories.
That's right. So if you approached them and said, hey, I would love to write a monthly column in your publication where I talk about, say I'm a chiropractor, about health and wellness. And, here's a sample column for this month. Let me know what you think. And it's just going to be a little bit of writing, and, tell them that you do want a sentence at the bottom where it talks about you, and make sure you get that little byline that mentions your company in the community. And they're going to say, why not make this weekly? And you got to hold steady. No, I just want to do it monthly. And that they would love to have free content every week, but you're just going to commit to once a month. So it's like 10 to 12 times a year. And it's a great way that everybody in that community who looks at that paper, mostly looking at ads and specials, will say, oh, this is interesting. And it's a pretty, benign but interesting article that gives some really good tips. And they notice, oh, the author is a local chiropractor. That's kind of cool. So they're going to, over time, the repetition of them seeing you again and again is going to make it very likely that when they do feel an ache and are considering a chiropractor, they're going to reach out to you. And this works with all different types of businesses, even dentists, and all, fitness instructors, gyms, all different types of individual businesses that are local have been able to make this work for them. And once you've done this and you are pitching journalists on a regular basis, you will find that you may not get pickup in the first 6 to 8 months. It may take a while, but eventually you will. And at some point, you will be contacted by them for a story that you didn't pitch them. They will say, hey, I'm working on this story. I was looking to plug in a local business, and you came, to my mind because you've reached out to me in the past. What do you think about this? And when that happens, put your creative hat on and try to make yourself fit into that article as best you can. And also tell them, I would love to give you a great quote, but I probably need a few minutes to work on it and really make it right. But I could send that over to you in a few minutes and follow up with you by phone. And that's how it works. In the Baltimore market, there is a company that I see 3 or 4 times a year in the Baltimore Sun. And I met them at a EO event, Entrepreneurs Organization event last year. And I asked them, I said, are you big advertisers? And they said, no, we just stop everything when they call looking for someone. So if they call and say, hey, we were wondering about, corporate wellness and wondering if you guys had anything, and he immediately brings in the HR person and they talk and brainstorm and put together a really good photo and quote for the journalists. So they're always willing to stop everything and be available to them. And as a result, they get picked up again and again because they're just so easy to put into an article. And that you can easily obtain yourself by just, building your own little Rolodex. And like I said, it's not very big. For a lot of people, it's like 4 to 6 people that they just reach out to locally on a regular basis.
But it's the consistency. I mean, it's same as publishing on social media or any of those kinds of things. If you want to get noticed, what I'm hearing is consistently, not necessarily, daily, like you sometimes feel like you have to on social media, but periodically providing something of value to the journalist, to the publication. Is that the best way to convert this? Because one of the questions is, so what will this do to my business? What will it do for my business? How will it help it grow?
Right. So the sad thing is it varies for everybody. Sometimes I have a dentist who has one of these weekly columns, and that dentist is like, I have a waiting list for cleanings. And, when someone cancels at the last minute, we just text or call those people on the waiting list, and we're always full. And they said it was never like that until I started my column 2 years ago. And they're like, they don't even write the column. They just have it freelanced. I think they pay $125 10 times a year. And it's like, it's for less than $1,500. They said it's the cheapest marketing they've ever done and the most effective. For other people, it may not fill up your schedule, but it's going to make it easier to convert when you do promote yourself. So if you are someone who is using these neighborhood papers, and then you're following up with Facebook paid advertising to that community, they're more likely to convert with you because they see you in the column and they're familiar with you. And the same thing with earned media. When you get an article, say in the New York Times, you generally get sales from something like that. But even when that's exhausted, you can take that article and that link and you can send it to your leads. And guess what? If your conversion rate was 20% and 80% of your leads usually don't convert, I guarantee you're going to see your conversion rate shift dramatically for people who read that article. So all of a sudden you may be converting 30% of your leads rather than 20%, a 50% improvement. And the same thing with your existing customers. There's something called churn, where you lose your customers. The lifetime cycle of a customer might be 3 years, but you start introducing these articles, they read it. What happens when they read articles, they get a signal of trust. It's a huge credibility boost. It's almost like an implied endorsement when a journalist chooses to write about you. And all of a sudden, the life cycle of your customers is going to elongate. They're going to stick with you longer. They're going to be less likely to say, maybe we should shop around and try someone else this year, because they'll read that article and they'll have that emotional response that we get when we read earned media, and they'll be more likely to stay with you. So these are all the things that'll help you and help your conversion rates. There are a lot of startups that we work with at eReleases from Shark Tank. The producers of the show recommend that they do a press release with us before their episode airs, and they come back and many of them do subsequent press releases. And the one thing I've noticed is that there's a lot of startups that will do a lot of earned media in the beginning and get a good base, and then they'll turn on paid advertising. And the reason for that is it converts better once they have the logos on their website, once they have the actual links to articles on their website, and once people have seen them on several different places. And they know that, if they just did Shark Tank and started the paid advertising, they might convert at, say, 17%, but with a few articles, a clip on Good Morning America, them appearing on in Inc. magazine, all of a sudden they'll see their conversion rate go up to 27% or something along those lines. And so it can really make a substantial improvement in your paid marketing by having those additional signals on your website showing your earned media.
Great. So I understand you have a free gift for the listeners. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the biggest criticisms I've heard for 25 years since I've been in business is that press releases don't work. And I will agree that 97% of press releases don't generate earned media. But we can learn a lot by looking at the 3% of press releases that do generate earned media and finding patterns in the types of those releases that anybody can do. So if you're looking to consider PR, or you've done PR in the past and it hasn't worked, I want you to start here and look at these strategic ideas for doing press releases that are meaningful and more likely to generate earned media. And that's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's completely free. It's less than an hour-long video, because I know that people don't watch 20-hour courses anymore. So I wanted to make it very accessible. But generally, anybody that goes through that and builds a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases, and all of them are these strategic types of releases, they're going to have 2 or 3 of those releases that will generate earned media. And as a result, they will have more of the better outcomes as a result of that. And again, it's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And there's one press release in there that never fails, always generates earned media. And I don't know why PR firms don't follow that. But it's a way in which, on average, people who follow that get 8 to 14 earned media articles every time they do it. And it's something that anyone can do.
Wow. That's a great result. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Mickie?
So our website's eReleases.com. You can chat, email, or call. You'll only speak to an editor. We have no sales quotas, no salespeople. There's no commissions or anything like that. And we're straight shooters. If we feel like you're not a good fit, we're pretty open about that. And if you have a press release that you've put together, we have a lot of samples and templates on our website. Feel free to email it to us and we'll take a look whether you're working with us or not. We'll do that free of charge. Just give us a couple business days to get back to you. And all of our social media is on the lower right of our website. And it's my direct LinkedIn if you want to reach out there. It's one of the few social media places that I actually spend time on. But we look forward to helping demystify press releases and help people focus on the types of press releases that are meaningful and more likely to yield results.
Great. And that concludes our show. Thanks to my guest, Mickie Kennedy of the Press Release Ninja and founder and president of eReleases. I hope you learned something about how to leverage press releases to grow your business. I know I did. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.